Eric here. This is a video on the progress I made this year on my 40 by 40 post frame high efficiency house project. This is on a rural lot on 5 acres and I've been designing it for a while now, but I started all the work I'm going to show in this video about June this year. So here in the intro screen, that's where we're at now. I'm going to give a little background. So here's the site. This is again 5 acres. Planning on siting the house at a fairly high point on the lot. Eventually there will be a shop sitting next to it as well, but that will come later. So about the design, it's a 40 by 40 post frame house, a lot of high efficiency details, doing some passive solar type work with the windows all on the south facing area. Got a pretty open floor plan, 2 bedrooms, a little office area, and a kind of a central utility room and bathroom serving everything. Energy efficiency details is going to have continuous perimeter insulation, insulated concrete piers, R20 under the slab, R37 double walls, R80 blown-in insulation, and then a continuous air barrier that's not pierced by any electrical or anything sitting in the double wall. I'm planning on doing the heating and cooling primarily with air source heat exchangers or air source mini splits, and then the backup heat is going to be 2 direct vent propane furnaces. So here we are. This is how it looked at the beginning of the year. Everything was empty. Had the farmer who was farming it previously put some oats in as a lead into the prairie restoration work that is planned. Here is where the drive is going to go. That was the first priority, is getting a drive in, because you couldn't even drive into the property at this point in time. So I got approval from the township to do that and ordered the culvert, bands, and aprons. Did call in and noticed that there was a telephone line going through there, so I chose to do all the digging for this by hand, which took a while. Here I am with the culverts and the aprons, picking those up from the county. And then there they are. I'm dropping in the culverts, the aprons, and you can see all that hand digging, getting all the topsoil stripped off is done at this point in time. Here I am. I got some 3/4 inch granite, probably overkill, but I used that for bedding the culvert. Getting the culvert put in, I put some landscape fabric under the culvert to make sure the granite didn't sink in over time and help distribute the load of any vehicles going over it. There I am getting the culvert, the aprons, and everything seated in there just right. And then it came time to rent a skid steer. This is the first time I'd ever rented any heavy equipment, first time driving a skid steer, so that was pretty exciting. So there I am with the skid steer, cutting out the driveway and placing some of that 3/4 inch rock. Not seen is the moment where I snagged the bands with the skid steer and pulled the whole deal out of the rock. Had to manually pull all the rock out with a shovel and put it all back. But nothing like learning the hard way. So there we are. Got some landscape fabric over the culvert, and then I started building it all back up with some of the clay that had been cut out. Here I took some additional clay, built up some banks, and started building it up and compacting it using a whacker packer. And then I started cutting out the area where the future house pad is going to go as well, making a huge pile of clay. And then there we are, that I started moving some black dirt onto the sides of the drive to get some nice banks. I'm going to seed those. And then here I was looking at the area where the house was going to go, and it had just rained, and I was noticing that all of the rainwater was collecting right where I wanted the house to go, which is no good. So I decided to change plans a little bit and build the house pad up slightly and do a little more drainage work. So I did that. Over time you'll see that. So there we are. I also seeded the banks on the drive. So here we are after building up the house pad a little bit and cutting even more material out. By this point in time I had a huge pile of clay. But the house pad was built up further, and next time it rained, no rain collected there. And then here I'm moving on. I rented the auger for the skid steer and started augering the holes. Went a little deeper than I had to, and built some concrete forms. So going back to the insulated forms, I built these insulated forms for all the concrete piers. They tie into the perimeter insulation, which will eventually be subgrade or below the dirt, and that's going to prevent heat from flowing out of the house through the floor. So that's a primary area we're going to have heat loss in a typical post frame building. So there we are with all the piers in place. There's 14 of them, 6 big ones and 8 smaller ones for the end walls. Started putting the grade boards in. I elected to notch the grade boards around this additional little step up for the wet set brackets. I wanted to maintain good cover over the rebar portion of the brackets per the manufacturer's guidelines, but this did complicate the build a little bit. Here I'm starting to cut out for the drainage for the waste pipes by hand. Was kind of a pain. Had some help from my dad. Ordered some gravel to come in. And then there we are. I'm putting all the pipes in for the waste vent system. Stubbing that all in, putting covers over everything so I can do a pressure test. It was a bear working with those big pipes too. It's very difficult getting them exactly where you want them because that glue sets up pretty quick, even if you use a lot of it. So did an air pressure test at this point in time to make sure there were no leaks, which there were not, which was a big relief. And then here I rented a mini excavator to start doing some of the trenching for the LP lines, water lines, and electric in. Getting a little tired of doing all that hand digging at this point. So that's one of the lines where the LP is going to go. There's going to be 2 lines for LP. I'm trying to minimize the LP plumbing that's actually inside the house and minimize any stepping over of different lines, keeping them all separate. So did a pressure test on that, passed. And then here, this is the water lines going in, and then one will go out to a future shop. So I wanted to put those all in now because they're buried down about 7 feet. You can see that they're sitting inside of drainage tile. That's something the well company recommended just to make it easier in the future if you ever have to move those around. Putting some bedding over the pipes. I used gravel for that, compacted all of it. And then here I am. This is putting the electric in. It's going to have a main ranch type panel outside the house, and then the house itself will be a sub panel. So I put the ground rods in for that, got the right burial depth, bedded everything in gravel, 2.5 inch PVC for this. And then at this point in time I was starting to work on finishing up the concrete piers and the insulation around them. The insulation needs protection to stop any animals from getting to it or any damage from people just walking around. The best choice I could find for that was stucco, or a special acrylic product that is a lot like stucco. And so that has a fiberglass tape you apply to the insulation, and then you using a trowel, you put the stucco on there. So here this is kind of in progress on that. You can see there's these little wings coming off the piers, and that's where it's going to attach to the rest of the perimeter insulation. If it didn't have those little wings, there'd be a gap right there where, again, animals could get in and under the building. So more work done on all that stucco. Took a while getting the stucco applied. And then here, at this point in time, I made the call that I wasn't going to actually start work on the building itself this year. So I needed to do something to get all the materials I had purchased under roof and covered up for the winter. So I bought a 40-foot Connex container and I started making plans for loading that up with the materials. One of these was getting these skids built for the metal roofing panels and siding panels. They're very difficult to move on their own, so this skid lets me use a skid steer to just drive in there under there with forks, and then it's got wheels so you can just roll it right into the container, which I did. So I built 2 of those up. You might notice that some of that plywood is taken off the concrete form, so I didn't have to buy all that new, so a minimum amount of materials there. A neighbor was generous enough to allow me to use their shed. So with the shed, I put some of the lumber piles there to keep those out of the rain and snow. And then here, finally got some gravel put in on the drive. I had a local company do this for me, so it's still quite busy at this point in time. And then here's a picture of all the materials that are in the Connex container. Again, got the windows in there, some triple pane vinyl windows, doors, all the posts, all the metal panels, and some other random trims. So wrapping up work for the year, I'm putting the perimeter insulation in. This is 2-inch XPS, 2-foot vertical, 2-foot horizontal. And I'm trying to kick it out around the piers as well to get a lot of protection against frost and heat loss. And then I'm going to build banks up eventually to the full height of the grade board, but at this point in time they're just minimal to keep the foam in place. So there we are, wrapping around the structure, getting all that foam in there, and then working up. There you can kind of see what it's starting to look like. you'll have to imagine that the grade is, or the dirt is rather, is built up to the full height of that board rather than where it is now. So I'm going to take that huge pile of clay back there, and it's going to elevate the whole deal up a little bit farther yet. So I essentially have moved a hill, which was just a little north of there, to right outside the building, which is going to help keep everything nice, high and dry. And then at this point in time, we got a unusual amount of snow for November, which really slowed down the progress. I almost finished putting the perimeter insulation in. I was planning on leaving one section undone and then driving in and dumping my piles of gravel in there, building that up, and then putting a layer of rock for a radon mitigation system. So closing up for the year, got all the materials protected, got some good progress done, and next year I'm going to work on getting the actual shell of the house constructed. So that's where I'm at. Thanks for watching. Eric out.